On Daf 22 of Yoma, we get part of the story of King Shaul, King Saul, who I personally consider to be one of the most tragic characters in the entirety of the Bible. And here he was king. And for a little bit of context, the people had demanded a king. And so God appointed Shaul to be king, but it seemed like, sometimes the most qualified person for a job still might not actually be qualified for the job. It's like if you force something and say, okay, I want the most qualified person available now. Well, it could be there is nobody who's really qualified for a very difficult job now. And Shaul seemed to be that kind of person. Like he was a very good, righteous individual, very capable individual, but he was clearly over his head as king of Israel. And when he was told that, okay, you're the best person in Israel, so you should be king, he really ran from it and didn't know what to do. And he went hiding. And it was somebody who was seemed like a good guy in over his head. And you saw that early on, and he's commanded to go and wipe out the nation of Amalek. God commands that this nation that had done evil to the Jewish people before should be wiped out. And he goes, and he can't bring himself to fully execute it. He only does it part way, but leaves the king alive, leaves the animals that he was told to destroy alive. And we're told in Daf 22 of Yoma that a divine voice comes out and says, don't be too righteous. I.e., look, your creator's telling you that this is something you should do. Don't try to be more righteous than God. Later on in Shaul's life, he starts getting very, very paranoid. And specifically around the character of David, who he kind of is starting to get a sense is going to be the guy to replace him as king. Because Shaul, through the instance with Amalek and through other instances, really lost his ability to lead the people. And David, who is the head of Shaul's army, runs away to Nov, the city of Kohanim, the city of priests. And as he's there, the priests see him and they think, okay, this is the head of Shaul's army. And he asks for certain things. He asks for food. He asks for a weapon. And they didn't realize that he's running away from Shaul, who has decided that he wants to kill David because he sees David as a rival. So they help him out, thinking they're helping the king's general, right? Good way to be loyal to the king. Except Shaul, who's very paranoid at this point and is very much shifted and is very much wants to be hanging on to the kingship, something he didn't want at all in the past, hears and it's like, these Kohanim, these priests, they're preferring David over me. Look at this. They're giving my rival food and weapons, and they won't be persuaded by saying, what do you mean? We were helping him because he worked for you, and we wanted to be helping you. And he didn't want to hear about it, and he wound up killing the population of this city and just wiping them out in a way he wouldn't do with Amalek. And a divine voice comes down and says, don't be too evil. So there's an interesting idea. It's like, okay, don't be too evil, we can see, but don't be too righteous. Should you not be too righteous? But we have this kind of principle that we see in the story with Shaul. Some people like to say that, if you are overly merciful with someone who doesn't deserve it, you're not able to really give justice when you need to be, then you're going to wind up being, not merciful enough with those who can really use it. Imagine a case where a murderer comes up before a judge and the judge is like, I really want to give you a second chance, and lets the guy go, and then he commits murder again. You can wind up by having too much mercy in one instance, leading to a lot of death in another. In fact, we see this all the time in Israel with prisoner exchanges and things, and people who get sent to jail for murder in Israel, for terrorism, and get released through one deal or another deal, and then they come out and wind up doing more murders. And it's this heartbreaking thing to see, wow, this guy was a convicted terrorist, and we let him back on the street, and he killed more people. And it's a real difficulty. It's like, okay, how do we handle this whole situation where, we want to be merciful, we want to try to be making peace with others, and sometimes these deals where we're trying to make peace prompt us to take certain steps, but those steps can sometimes come out to really bite us when the peace doesn't come through as we dreamed and hoped that it would. So that's the real message from Daf 22 of Yoma, this whole idea, definitely don't be too evil, but also think about your righteousness. Are you sometimes being too righteous? Are you being too lenient? I know that definitely suffered from that as a parent, that there are times that I didn't want to enforce discipline and I let things totally slide and it set a really bad pattern. And sometimes I need to be a little bit less merciful in order to be more just.